Welcome to Kettlebell Corner, where strength meets theory, where we take you on a deeper dive into all things kettlebells. I'm Jeremiah Waylon, and he's Roger Parks. And in this episode, we're going to learn you a few things about learning, Roger. How smart do I sound now? Brainiac?
Regular amount of smart, I suppose.
Regular amount of smart. That's right. That's me. Regular amount of smart. All right. And, I'm the type of guy who will take a picture in front of the statue of David pretending to pinch his penis. All right. I don't think this is going to fly on the internet now, but
he just sent me the picture too, actually.
It's real. Roger, how you doing, bro?
I'm good.
I even broed you.
Oh yeah, I'm a little warm, but I'm good otherwise.
Yeah. Well, hence the sleeveless endeavor here.
Mm-hmm.
Today, Roger, I think we should teach everybody how to learn every kettlebell skill out there. What do you think?
Sure. Yeah, if we got 10 minutes, we'll do that.
Yeah. Pretty quick. So buckle in, everybody, and get your notepad out. On the serious tip, though, those we talked about this in the prep, and I kind of come up with a generalized idea, and Roger-fies it so that it, it's a little bit more contextual. I think you like that word, Roger. Contextual.
I do like that word.
And what we distilled this down to was learning how to learn, because you can get a lot of information from podcasts, especially exercise podcasts, about rep ranges or do this or do that, or your favorite, the deadlift, the kettlebell swing is just a fast deadlift sort of tip.
Mm-hmm.
That's really solid right there. Don't use that, anybody, ever. But this is the kind of stuff that's out there, and we'd be remiss to provide you the same. So, Roger, you like to learn. In fact, I think that's what you do with most of your time. Am I right?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I know. And I never will learn, because I shouldn't ask you close-ended questions like that, because it leads us nowhere. But hey, we're all learning it, so it goes right now. How does one start learning, Roger? I mean, I could open a book, I could watch our video, but is that going to be the most useful way to go about it?
You did it again. The answer is no.
Refer back to how does one start learning? There was two questions in there. Damn it.
One of the things that I think is, I shouldn't say one of the things, the thing I think that you should start with is make sure you're learning the right thing. If you've decided you want to learn a skill, we're a kettlebell podcast, so we're going to talk about kettlebells. If you want to learn a kettlebell skill, and I think this is a pretty common way, is to actually collect them. You start with one, you move to another, like, oh, I'm good at this, let's try that, which I think is really cool and a really good way to do it. So
Pokemon style.
Yeah, exactly. So let's say you've decided you want to learn a new skill. Why? Figure out what it is you're trying to get out of it. Have you decided you want to learn the kettlebell swing because you want to be stronger? If so, you have to ask more narrow questions, because if you're talking about what we call limit strength, the ability to just move something really, really heavy, I don't think a kettlebell swing is in the top 10 for that. Can it be helpful? Yeah, it could be helpful. Could it teach you a particular type of strength that you might need? Sure. But I don't think that it's going to be a great movement for those who want to just lift very, very heavy things. At least not, maybe a good supplement, not the main course. So start with the idea of learning, figuring out what it is you want to learn. What is this thing, and what do you think it's going to do to your body? And what do you want it to do to your body? Because when you figure that out, you get into some specificity. So let's say you do have a goal of, let's call it strength endurance. So you want to be stronger for longer.
Heck
well,
yeah.
That's going to be different than, let's say, I want to generate what most people call power. I want to move something quickly. The load you'll use, the rep range, the rest, these things they all change based on those two goals. So you can use the kettlebell swing to do both of those things, but you're going to create kind of a forking, a decision tree. All right. So if I want this, this particular thing, I want power, then we're going to go this way. If I want strength endurance, we're going to go that way. So you need to figure out what it is you want to learn, why you want to learn it, because you don't want to waste your time when the novelty wears off and you're bored with something. Are you still going to want to learn this thing? And sometimes we do, and that's really what motivation's all about. It's you continuing with this thing even though it's not new and shiny. So get that down, and then in the process figure out what it is you want to do with your body. That way you can talk about stimulus, because stimulus is really important. If you are trying to, let's go back to the two goals I just mentioned. If you're trying to get strength endurance and you're doing, a set of 2 to 3 really explosive swings, and then you're resting for 5 minutes, that's not going to be the best way to do that. Good if you're trying to learn power, for example, assuming you have all those other prerequisites. But the one is not, one set of actions or one particular type of stimulus is not going to work to get the other goal. Just isn't. So that's where I start, because it grounds my learning in something that I want and something that's specific. Now, what I've done is I've created questions that I can ask. And, the last episode we talked about is getting to a point, which is something I've been doing more and more with all types of decision making. Can I get myself to a binary question, a yes or a no, or does this do that, or does this not do that? That makes it a lot easier when you're dealing with all these multiple factors, even though they may, overlay and interact. If you can get to the point where you said, okay, well, this is what I need to focus on now, and does this thing do this or does it not do that? It makes it a lot easier to progress the learning.
So you're using, I guess, what we call needs analysis to determine and distill it down to, like, yeah, that does what I need it to do.
And then I can start, as I go along. Now we're still talking, don't forget, about movement acquisition. We're learning new movements, but as I'm learning them, my rep range might be a particular thing. But as I go down the rabbit hole, I'm going to need to get specific. I just talked to someone who came in for an assessment today, and she's been talking to some other coaches, some other trainers, and was asking me questions about, so-and-so said this and so-and-so said that. Someone, it's like I'm getting contradictory information, and, she says I need to lift heavy, and he says, that I need to go to failure. She's like, what do you think? And I said, honestly, I think it doesn't matter, because you've been doing nothing for the last, 2 years in terms of weight training. You're what we call untrained. So while you were learning,
be heavy.
While you were learning the skill, your body's adapting. And by the time you've learned, and by the time we're done cleaning up your movement, then we can start talking about the proper stimulus. For now, we don't even need that, but it is something to keep in mind, because as you go through the process, you're going to want to understand what types of stimulus you're going to need, because that brings us to the next step with the skill. Do you have the physical capacity to begin learning this skill? Because if you do not, if you don't understand the stimulus you need and whether or not you have the necessary prerequisites, do you have the mobility required? Do you have the tissue tolerance? Do you have the muscle? If you're looking to, let's say, build power, but you don't have a good baseline of strength, I would encourage you to go do some basic strength training first. I think you're going to get more bang for your buck that way, and then come back to the swing. You can still learn it if you want to learn it, as long as it doesn't interfere with your other work. But you're probably not going to want to do that for reps until you check the other boxes first. And that's another value in understanding the stimulus required, because you will be able to go off into the world and prepare your body for the work ahead.
Oftentimes with these movements and these skills, particularly kettlebells, whether it's a fast ballistic or one of those grind types lifts, it could be anything, really. You look at it visually, and then essentially you're trying to emulate it, which could, I think, as you've said before, lead you down a bad path, because generally just copying what it looks like, you might be moving with something wrong. So the target we're going for here is physical feel. How does one decide when that is a priority, or is that something that you want them to try and do from the start?
That's something that I want people to do from the start, but in order to get there, I think that you need to understand the essence of what it is you're trying to do. And this is not
herbal
about
essence.
What was that?
With the herbal essence?
Is that like shampoo or something?
You don't know about that.
I don't know about that.
When you talk about essence, it's like the feel of it, or what is when you say the essence of a skill?
Okay, so you can describe a squat in a lot of ways. You can say it's an exercise. You can say it's an exercise that targets your quads, or an exercise that targets your glutes or your legs or whatever. Cool. I don't think that's wrong, but is that the essence of the lift? I don't think it's the essence of the lift. I think the essence of the lift is more objective based. It's a little more primal. A squat brings you closer to the ground and then farther away from the ground. Okay. The essence of the squat is about vertical displacement for the most part. Now you can use that vertical displacement to gain different, physiological objectives, look better or feel stronger. That's completely true. But you should understand that there is that vertical emphasis with the squat that you're not going to get with different movements. And its objective is to bring your center of mass closer to the ground and then farther away. Or for whatever reason, you start lower, farther away, and then higher, whatever. Either way, there's an arrow up and down. And that's what I mean by the essence. So
okay.
Let's say you're focused on emulation, your mimicry, you're focused on looking at someone else and saying, this is what this looks like. And your trainer or your coach says, okay, I want you to keep the chest up and I want you to keep the feet forward and the knees can never go over the toes. And this is how this thing looks. If you don't understand the essence of the movement, you're focused on all these other things. And you don't get to necessarily ask the other questions. Okay, well, if you understand the essence that it is about moving up and down, and how do I do that best? And then you start, asking some simple questions. How could I get closer to the ground and then farther away from the ground? And you really, if you're holding something, you really only have three options. You can get the weight, if that's what you're focused on, which you should not be, closer to the ground with your arms. You could use your spine or you could use your legs. And what I found, and I have been coaching for a very long time, the idea of squatting with your spine is something I encounter more often than not. I would say 85% of the people I encounter, maybe more, use their spines to stand up in a squat more than they use their legs. And I don't think I've ever worked with anybody, including kettlebell coaches, who haven't had at least a little bit of that. And
you're not talking about me, are you?
Well, you would be on that list.
Oh, shit. I'm on the list.
You would be on the list. But, it's been several years now. I was on that list too. I didn't realize how much tension I was using in my upper body to try to hold myself up rather than settling down into my legs.
Got it.
And I didn't realize how much more I could get out of my skills by using my legs. Now, that doesn't mean that your spine isn't a factor. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't, hold tension there or keep everything tight. But we're talking about this idea. We've done podcasts on this before, the engine. So if we understand the essence of the squat is to move up and down, what engine do you want to use? And if I can, reduce it to two choices, the spine or the legs, I would rather use my legs because I think they're stronger than my spine. They're also they're in direct contact with the floor via the feet. So when you distill something to its essence and you understand what it is you're trying to do, then all the other decisions that you make from there unravel from a logical starting point. And I'm not, when I get all of these cues, for example, staying with the squat, when I get the chest up cue, right? I might be able to tell my coach like, hey, you're telling me to put my chest up, but when I put my chest up, I feel my back and I feel like I'm shifting forward on my feet. I'm not comfortable. When I keep my chest down, I feel it in my legs and I feel like my whole foot is grounded. That is feedback that you can give to someone else. And frankly, a lot of coaches don't understand the ramifications of their cues. We've been taught a particular way and we recite it. We keep it going. And there's that dogmatic cycle from one coach to the next. And what may have started off as a perfectly valid and useful cue turns into this universal construct that everybody has to follow. So if you know as a learner that your movement has an essence or an objective, and the commandment that you're getting from your coach takes you away from that, then you now have something to evaluate that coach's advice, and you now have a piece of feedback for your coach, like, hey, that doesn't work for me, or oh, that causes pain. And that's helpful both for a coach and for a student.
So I love that. The essence, it sort of really like simplifies what you're trying to do. And then, like you said, you can logically sort of put your body in the right position. And I would gather to say that that's how you begin to gain the optimal positioning for your body. Because as we've stated many times, we are not the same people. No one person is the same as the other. And all the physics that go with all that and your limb lengths and stuff like that is dependent upon your understanding of the overall objective of whatever skill you're doing. Not aside from like the stimulus you're trying to get out of it. It's now distilled down to just move my butt up and down, essentially,
sure,
on the squat.
And when you get into, let's take it into the swing. When you have, a focus, let's say on the hips, well, a horizontal focus can take away a vertical focus, and you need both. But this is the book I'm working on now, and I'm going through that final edit. And the recommendation is to forget about all of that and to stand up fast, because standing up fast is something that, when you do it from the proper position, it uses all of the muscles that you need to use. The focus should not be on the hips shooting forward. Now, if you need the hips to shoot forward because for whatever reason you're stopping short in your swings, then that can be a very useful cue, and that's something for you to work on. But that's between you and you, or you and your coach. But as a general rule or a starting point, standing up fast brings things to more of an objective that will encompass a lot of very complex stuff. When you stand up fast, starting in the right position, you're going to work your quads, you're going to work your hamstrings, you're going to work your glutes, you're going to do all of that. And it's something that you do all the time. So you already have a sort of, motor pattern for that. You'll have to decide once you start doing it, well, do I actually know how to stand up? Do I stand up well? If that's the case, then this isn't going to work for you, which is why there's no cue that's right for everybody. But the point is, try to take these complex things and make them a bit simpler and make them digestible, something you already know how to do. So, the essence of the kettlebell swing, it's a lot like a jump without leaving the ground, but you do still have to keep your feet planted. So, if I were to say the essence of the kettlebell swing is to make this bell move up very fast, then I can start talking about how do I do that? What's familiar? Well, keep my arms attached to my body, pressed against my body, connect the bell with a hike or a backswing, and then stand up really, really fast. And when people do that, they tend to swing a lot faster than if we start talking about,
push your hips back and
exactly. And the deadlift is a useful skill to help teach this thing, but it's an exercise and it's not something most of us think about every day. Maybe as a coach you do, but as a regular person you do not.
Yeah, it's sort of like eliminating the jargon. Don't get caught up in, there's this thing out there, coach speak, where you start to talk about, maybe Roger and I know every muscle in the body and like where they attach and what they do. And, you got flexion, extension and planes and motion and stuff like that. And you're going to get lost in that. Your head will start swimming if that's how we communicated. Whereas if we're saying to you, stand up fast, all right, now I'll teach you how to hold your arms against your body. This is a principle that will make that bell move the way that you are intended with the kettlebell swing, just due to the physics of it all, right? And that's kind of an amazing thing if you think about it, Roger. My mind is blown right now by you. Okay.
Well, I don't know how we're going to continue then.
That's it. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for checking us out. It's over. But the simplification of it is
I've got a kind of an example and a funny story before we wrap up this little segment. I was working with a client yesterday. I forget what day it is sometimes.
Yeah.
And he was refining his push-ups. Really good athlete, great client, really wants to learn. And, his push-ups will give him some problems sometimes in the shoulder. And what was happening is the shoulder blades were coming off of his rib cage, or his rib cage actually was disappearing. It was dropping away. So the scapula didn't really have anything to rest on. So we need to get a little, let's just say, ab engagement for, the short term in order to get him to keep his rib cage in place, stacked over his hips. And that way the scapula actually had something to rest on and the shoulder pain went away. But he had a hard time feeling that kind of hollow body position. He had a hard time feeling his abs. And rather than, me getting too wrapped up in jargon, and he's like, yeah, I'm not quite finding it. And I said, I want you to look at me. And I held a finger. I said, I want you to pretend like I have dog poop on my finger. And you're stuck and you can't move back. And I'm coming at you with my poopy finger and you're trying to avoid it. What are you going to do? He immediately pulled his stomach in. Immediately. Everything just contracted. He's like, oh. I said, yeah, that. And then he did it. He went right into his push-ups and the shoulder pain went away. So when you can make something real and simple, right? When you know what it is, you would do in a particular example, suddenly, his body responded the way we wanted it to respond. Now, would that happen in every scenario? No. I mean, some people might be just completely disgusted by me. I'm like, what are you talking about? Lick it. Right. So again, not universal, but in that instance, that imaginary poo finger was exactly what I needed. So as soon as he would start to disconnect and I'd come underneath with the finger and he's like,
whoa, okay. This podcast is going off the rails. Real quick, two things. Sure. Underrated is the push-up. And it's something that I've noticed a lot more with people I coach and just in general. I think people are shortchanging themselves on their push-ups a lot of time and just banging them out because 100 reps is something. And if you want to know about 100 reps a day or something, we got episodes on that too. But it's like, it's underrated how bad people's push-ups are these days. And just a few simple things like maybe a poopy finger can get them to do it better. Depends where you put that poopy finger, I guess. And shout out to you, Roger. That's a great cue. I don't know how I'd ever use it. I would never even think of the poopy finger cue. But you, for like, I tend to think of us as Pinky and the Brain. And if you've watched, Adult Swim back in the day, you know what's up. And you can guess which one I am and you can guess which one he is. I would guarantee you would misalign who gave the poopy finger cue. And now you all know the truth. All right.
Well, it goes back to what you were saying, though. You don't need the coach speak. You need something that is going to elicit the proper response in the body. Right. And then, as we continue to go through this learning process, we now have the ability to start giving people the proper sensations and putting people in the right positions. And that's something that you're going to need to understand as you swing. So, when you learn, you've gone through all this process, you're learning the right thing, you're properly motivated, you're prepared, you know the right stimulus, you understand the essence. Now you can start saying, okay, what are the movement lessons that I really need? You can get into the shape if we go to the squat, or let's go to the swing because it's a little more complex and probably a better example. So is a deadlift in there? Absolutely a deadlift's in there. Do I teach a deadlift when I teach a swing? I absolutely do. I just don't say it's the same thing. Right. Because there's some fundamental differences, and saying it's the same thing, I think, gets people distracted. So we talk about the frame. Like, hey, you're going to use these things to move, and this is how you use your hip joints. You're going to learn the lessons of moving through the hips while the spine stays still. You're going to learn how it feels to get the chest toward the ground, which is something that's not intuitive to a lot of people, especially if they've been taught that chest up cue in the squat. So we start to do kind of like a frame. Like, this is what it looks like. This is how you move through it. And then once we do that, like, okay, well, what are the fundamental differences once you've got the basic frame, right? if you were to take a deadlift and you were to take a swing and take a photo at a certain point and then just completely remove the arms and the implement, you might see a similar position, but the lifts are still very, very different. So then we can ask, well, what are the differences? Well, for one, the trajectory of the lifts are hugely different, and that really matters because the deadlift, the barbell is going to go straight up and down, or whatever. You just use a kettlebell. You've already got it in your hands. Why not? That's going to move up and down, whereas the swing is going to have this big arc it's going to go through. So where the kettlebell starts is going to be huge, but the speed of the lifts is tremendously different. And now we're going to have to say, okay, well, how do I learn the speed? And this is why we will sometimes use jumps, because the jump is something that people know. It's intuitive. So do we have to put that on top of some other stuff and use some other kind of scaffolding and say, okay, well, I want you to take this and now take that, saying it's like a jump without leaving the ground gets a lot of people where they need to go, but at very least it gets people understanding how fast they need to move. So now we're experiencing the proper speed. We're teaching the brain, this is how fast the legs need to move, because you can do a squat and not jump, right? Mm-hmm. But at a certain point, there's a break. And this is a contrast drill I'll do. Say, hey, I want you to squat, and I want you to squat faster, 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 faster. No one ever leaves the ground. But as soon as I tell them to leave the jump or leave the ground by jumping, everything changes. It might look very similar, but suddenly the legs move fast enough, and sure enough, they leave the ground. So that's about feeling the right sensations. So then once you frame the thing, you know how to move, through the proper joints, through the spine. Now you can get the proper speed, right? So these are all lessons that you're learning. These are movement lessons. You're piling one on top of the other. Then maybe like, okay, well, what's a big breaking point in the in the swing? How do a lot of people screw it up? Well, they want to lead with their arms. So I teach them how to keep their arms tight. So maybe I'll have them hold a towel or a band or something, and I'll pull their arms away from them. Nope. Keep it tight, keep it tight, keep it tight. They learn the right muscles to do that. Now they can pull that band even into the backswing. So they're learning how to do that and keep that tension into the backswing. So people are learning all of these different sensations that they're layering. They're learning, and by learning, I mean feeling one movement lesson at a time. And then we can find a drill like, the horny thighs drill, which we're both fans of.
Hell yeah.
That layers all these pieces together so they're familiar. You give someone a very simple movement objective and say, okay, don't break back until you feel the horns of the bells on your thigh. Then all of a sudden they're swinging. So this is kind of the next step. Learning to feel all the pieces that you need to feel. But you can't, it's very rare that you can feel them all at once. And that's where a lot of people go wrong, is they're in such a hurry to put it all together. I think one of the old requirements for the RKC test was you had to pull a stranger off the street and teach them how to kettlebell swing in some arbitrary amount of time. It's like, okay, cool. Maybe that teaches some learning skills, but I would imagine most of these people aren't going to have great swings.
Yeah, it takes time for that. And, if you're pulled off the street for anything, seems sketchy to me. Well, hey, come in here. Come to this room with sweaty dudes, and I'm going to teach you how to do something violent. Hey, you in for it? That guy's not even wearing sleeves, and he's got a neck tat. This is getting wild. I like that. Distilling down the essence. But first, knowing the goal that you're trying to do, getting the essence of it, finding the proper positioning, and really feeling each aspect. And organically, all these things should sort of come together as you layer them on. And particularly like with kettlebells, we're big evangelists for them. We love how they help you in, I guess, general fitness is the best way to put it. You want to play with your kids, you want to lift things that are probably heavier than most people can lift, and you want to have some endurance and some power that translate over to the pickleball court, then great. They're the perfect thing for you. Now, to rush them is going to be a bit of a challenge because they are a skill, and skills require learning. If you have a proper base for your learning and not just taking these I guess, junk tips off the internet, you're probably going to get where you need to be. Maybe it'll take a little longer, but it'll be better, essentially. And that's like the real learning process in it, right, Roger?
I do think so. Once you get to the point where you're starting to feel these things and you put them together, that really kind of brings us to the next stop, and that's troubleshooting, right? How do you troubleshoot? Troubleshooting is pretty easy to do if you can reduce your problem to some binary questions. Where do I start? We did one, maybe you can link it on the algorithm that's specific to the swing, but you can create algorithms for any lift. What are the necessary conditions, and then how do we meet them before we go to the next step? And what are the order of these? What's the order of these steps? But you can watch podcasts, but just make sure that the videos you are watching give you some sort of principle or something very actionable that you can take away. We were talking in the beginning when we were prepping about a podcast that I watched recently that I really enjoyed. And there's a guy named Keith Barr, and he's doing some really cool work with tendon training, which I've been using for last couple months. And, I've watched several of his things and learned what I can, and I continue to learn from him. But I watched the podcast where he was talking about protocols, and this stimulus for this duration with this rest does this, and that's very actionable. That's something that I could take away. I took that principle and I started playing with it and applying it to my training. And what's the right way to do? Now, this is all relatively, new research, and there are a lot of ways that it can be combined. But because I had a good principle to go on, this was immensely valuable to me. And, that was a very useful podcast. And because the algorithm is the algorithm, it says, oh, you watched these two podcasts with this guy, so maybe you want to watch another one with another guy. It's like, okay, let's check this out. So I watched another podcast with another coach, and it was utter garbage. It's not that the coach was bad. I'm sure the coach is really top notch. I've heard this guy's name before, but he didn't make any claims. He was an evangelist. He was, one who spreads the good news. And that's all he did, was talk about how, superior his form of training was, but there was not much actionable. And all, the episode could have been called "I Love Fascia." Like, cool, fascia's great, but like,
where do you meet her at?
Tell us something about it other than why you're right and everyone else is wrong, and all this anecdotal nonsense and all the trite things I've read and all the same books you've read. Give us something actionable. The hosts of the show were just kind of grinning in agreement, but they didn't have any real questions for this guy. Now, interestingly, when they had Keith Barr on the episode, they had very specific questions, because the information that Keith Barr was offering was very specific. And they also seemed to have an implicit understanding of how far superior this guy was as a subject matter expert. They didn't really have questions for the other guy because the information didn't really facilitate it. So, it was three dudes just kind of massaging each other for an hour. And if you're into that, that's cool.
Yeah.
But like I'm not really interested in knowing what you think, or knowing even less what you feel. I want to know something that is actionable. And I got exactly 0 principles out of this. And I should have stopped watching, but I couldn't. I wanted to see it through to see if
based
maybe
on principle.
Useful. Yeah, exactly. but there was 0 useful in this. And it was something that would have really appealed to me in my 20s. This whole idea of, I remember there's a book called Movement that Gray Cook wrote. And it was an important book to change the way we thought about training, but it didn't have a lot that was really actionable in there for me. So not that it wasn't useful, but that wasn't really what he was trying to do. He was trying to, to set something up in a particular way. And then from that, you have this whole functional fitness movement that comes out of that. So you get a lot of people who basically are sitting around talking about how stupid other types of fitness are, and you agree with it. So it resonates as valuable to you, but there's no real takeaway. And that's something that I want a takeaway. And that's something you should think about when you go into your problem solving. Hey, was there a takeaway? And you'll even notice with us, we try to give people something, but we struggle to give people takeaways because without a specific movement and without a personal context, it's really difficult to give somebody something. So that's why we keep asking, like, hey, give us some videos, send us some stuff about, send them some stuff on your forum, and we will break it down on an episode, and we will show you the process of coaching and decision making in action, because we have both a context and we have an objective, right? With someone like Keith Barr, he was just talking about his own research, which he knew very, very well. And his research led to a very sort of principle-based thinking that was very useful. But beyond that, these other people just get on and say, this is good, or this is bad, or this is stupid, and that's not stupid. And it's like, it doesn't work the same way. So avoid those. Look for things that are principle-based. Look for things that are actionable. Look for things that, even if it's a drill, right? Hey, I'm having X problem. Let me put it in the Google search and see what comes up. You can try it. Does this help you? Yes or no? That's binary. And as long as it doesn't hurt you, and most things probably won't, then you can evaluate its value.
Distill it to the essence.
Mm-hmm.
Yes or no? Is this good for me? I like that. So with all that being said, Roger's correct. Send us a video. Damn it. We will give you free coaching on this podcast. And if you want us to blur out your face, too bad. I don't know how to do that on this stuff. So just be okay with it, Nobody will hate.
He puts a sticker on his screen so he can't see it.
That's right. On my own screen. It's not even going to translate. Anyways, we also want you to get better at your kettlebells. So download the Bells app. And I am putting a workout from that Bells app in every one of these episodes. It's in the description. So go in there, get it, do it. Tell us what you feel, because what you feel is important, as we discussed in this episode. And hell, you might even film a portion of that and send it to us. And there you go. You practically are training with us. And everybody who knows that's trained with us, they're better than they've ever been in every way. Every way. So you could be like that too. Anything else on learning?
Yeah, a lot, but I think that's enough.
It for
that's
today.
Enough for now.
Okay. All right. So remember, when you listen to something, go to sleep and then try it the next day. That's how learning sets in, I think. Anyways, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe, share, follow, all that good stuff that everybody wants you to do that you probably don't. And it really helps us. We want to help more people. So you can help us. We'll help you. Scratch and back style. All right. Thanks for listening, and stay strong, everybody.